Ms. B. Chatfield, and I am a landscape architect and project manager from Boston Parks and Recreation Department, and I'm working on the renovation of Mission Hill Playground. Tonight is our first community meeting on this project, so thank you for joining us. It's very exciting. I want to welcome everyone here tonight, but especially I'd like to welcome any elected officials that we may have. If there are any here tonight, please click the raise hand button now, and you can introduce yourself. Anyone? No, okay. I want to let you all know, first of all, that this meeting is being recorded so that we can make it available on the project website. This allows us to share it with people who can't make it tonight, and it should be up on the website within 1 week. We're going to provide you with that link at the end of tonight's presentation. Tonight's meeting will be different from our typical community meeting. Usually we're all together, but these days we're doing an online presentation and a discussion, and I appreciate you trying this out with us. So let's have the next slide. This meeting has 2 ways to interact. If you're joining us on a computer, to ask a question, you click on the raise hand button on the bottom of the screen. That will alert one of us and you'll be called on in the order that the hands were raised. You can also type your question by clicking the Q&A button and entering your question there. We'll be showing you the presentation first, and at the end, we'll respond to your questions. For anybody who's joining us by phone tonight, we understand there may be a few of you, dial *9 to raise your hand, and my colleague Christine will call on you in the order that you raised your hand. She'll then allow you to unmute yourself, which you do by pressing *6. We have the next slide. And we don't have any interpretation tonight, so next slide. Our agenda, this is our agenda for the night. I'm going to introduce the project team. I'll describe the schedule and the status of our project. Then the design team will present their site analysis. After the design team presentation, we're going to open it up for discussion and listen to your thoughts, and we'll try and respond to your questions. Lastly, we'll explain what our next steps will be so that you can attend our future meetings and understand our process. Next slide. So here's the project team. I am B. Chatfield, the project manager. My email address is abigail.chatfield@boston.gov. If you have any questions, please send me an email. Let me know if you have any questions or any thoughts. Christine Brandeo is our outreach coordinator. Her email is christine.brandeo@boston.gov or 617-961-3006. We also have Kyle Zick and Danielle Desaletz here from Kyle Zick Landscape Architecture. They are our designers, and they have a lot of great experience designing parks and public spaces throughout Boston, so we're really thrilled to have them on board. And we also have Shanice Pimentel, who is part of the Mayor's Office of Neighborhood Services. Perhaps some of you know her. She's Shanice Pimentel at boston.gov or 617-635-2679. Next slide, please. So when we design a park at the Parks Department, we take into account a lot of different things, and we try and balance them all. And let me go back 1 slide. There we go. So we have the City of Boston priorities that we're trying to work with. We have safety guidelines and regulatory guidelines that govern everything we do. We've got community input, which is what we're doing here tonight. We really want to hear what you have to say to us. And we also have our own parks and recreation goals, which help support the City of Boston priorities. We bring all of those things together, and our designers bring their talents and skills and their ears and their pens and their computers and create a fantastic park design. So these are all the things that we're trying to balance. Next slide, please. So the City of Boston priorities are expanding walkable access to parks, addressing equity, climate resilience within our neighborhoods, health of our citizens, and improving housing and community building. Next slide, please. The parks and recreation goals, we're trying to design parks that are accessible and available to all, create spaces that are diverse, balanced with an efficient mix of uses, meaningful and inclusive community engagement, creation of adaptive and resilient landscapes, and promote connections, not just physically within neighborhoods, but between neighbors. Next slide. Here at the Mission Hill Playground, our scope of work is going to be improvements to the upper terrace, the play area on the middle level, the paths, the baseball field, the furnishings, and the plantings throughout. Next slide, please. Our project timeline. Right now, we've already done a little bit of site assessment, which just really means walking through the playground, talking to our maintenance guys, really figuring out what's out there right now. And we're having our community meeting 1 here in November. After this community meeting, we're going to take what we hear from you and we're going to generate a few different design ideas, very preliminary. And then we come back to talk to you again in December, community meeting number 2. And that's where we say, we have a few ideas. What do you like from each idea? And then we regroup again, develop the design further, and then come back to the community for our last meeting in January of 2021, where we say, this is what we heard. Did we get it right? And hopefully we get consensus and we move ahead with the design of this park and we create the contract documents, the specifications, etc. So that means throughout the spring, we will be really detailing this design. We will go into construction summer of 2021, and we will complete the park in summer of 2022. Next slide, please. So now I'm going to hand this off to our design team.
And before we go any further, I just wonder, I think other people have attended and maybe we should ask again if any elected officials are here or if anyone has questions about the overall project before we get into specifics.
Yeah, I see that Kenzie Bach, the city councilor, is here. And I think I'm a kind of a late addition to the meeting, so I wasn't introduced. I'm Rob Rotenbucher. I'm the chief engineer of Boston Park and Recreation. So,
Councilor Bach, you can, if you would like to say a few words.
Sure. Just want to thank the project team and say I'm really glad to be here. I'm excited about this process. I think the playground we're talking about tonight really lies at the heart of the Mission Hill community, and it's used by all community members, and as was referenced, by just a really wide mix of users, and it's a central connection. It's surrounded by many of the chief institutions of the neighborhood, from the church to the library, Mission Main, you know, our main shopping street on Tremont Street. So I just really think of this playground with its 3 levels as sort of the beating heart of Mission Hill. And I think that it's going to be really important to have a robust community process. So I just want folks to know that if you have comments throughout this process, in addition to chatting with Parks and with Shanice, you're welcome to come chat with me or Henry Santana, my aide for Mission Hill, who is a lifelong user of this particular playground and is also on the call. And I just want to stress that one thing we're going to be looking to do is come up with creative ideas to make sure that we get input from a wide variety of folks, including folks who may not be finding their way to Zoom tonight. So I know I've already chatted with Bea and the project team, and we're going to be looking for creative ways to do on the ground neighborhood outreach, despite the fact that we're not having in-person meetings these days. So just want to thank the team again and say I'm very glad to be here tonight. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilor Bach.
Okay, so I'm going to kick it off for KZLA for the design team. Again, I'm Danielle Deslotz. I'm a senior associate project manager, landscape architect for the team. And excited to be starting in on this project and hoping to hear a lot of feedback and thoughts and ideas from you all tonight. So I'm going to start with a little bit of, excuse me, a little bit of context. So hopefully you know the site and you understand where it is, but we just thought we'd show just in case. We'd like to show the park in context so you get an idea of what else is around. So we've got on the bigger image there, the aerial image, we have it highlighted in the center in orange. You probably know Kevin Fitzgerald Park, which is relatively new or has been updated relatively recently. And then there's a fair amount of other larger greens areas in the area, including Back Bay Fens, the Charles itself, the Riverway Park, Clemente Field. You also have institutions like the Museum of Fine Arts and the New England Baptist Hospital, where this park is a short walk from Roxbury Crossing MBTA station, which is fantastic. It means I have a lot of access, and as Councilor Brock just pointed out, it's right on Tremont Street, which is a major thoroughfare in the area and the neighborhood. So it's really at the center of everything. And I think that makes it really, really special for everyone. And next slide, Kyle. So we'd like to give a few different perspectives because we know not everyone's used to looking at aerial images or the plans that we work with. So I want to make sure that you can all understand what we're talking about and get some relevance. So this image here is actually a bird's eye view, kind of spun around from what we looked at before. So in this case, south is to the north of the slide, but Tremont Street runs diagonal, and you can see the Basilica right next door. On the other side of the park on Tremont is the public library, and then there's the Maurice Tobin School down towards Smith Street, and of course Smith Street is another significant thoroughfare in the area, in the neighborhood. So the park, as Councilor Bark mentioned, is kind of has these three tiers. There's the more what we refer to as a passive park, where there's no significant active or recreation type spaces. So that's more of a seating area. It's got some lawn, it's got some slopes, but it's really a seating area with some dining tables that's really associated and closely associated with Tremont Street. So then the restaurants across the street, so you might use it to get some takeout and come across the street to dine there, or just to associate and socialize with neighbors. Then there's the middle area, which is the playground and the core there, and then the ball field down towards Smith Street. We're referring to this as Mission Hill Playground. We understand it's also been known in the past, and many of you might refer to it as Sheehy Smith Playground too. So same park. Next slide, please. So there's a lot of different amenities and different opportunities in the park. There's, of course, there's the baseball field, there's basketball hoops at the playground area, there's views of not only the Basilica, but also some fantastic views of the city skyline towards downtown Boston. You've got the fairly robust playground that has a number of different elements. It's got the central play space with spray pad, a splash pad. It's got climbing structures. It's got swings and slides. It's got all the good stuff. And the next slide shows a bunch of images that looks at some of the other amenities on the site. So we have this decorative entry gate. We have cast iron fences, a lot of stonework, a lot of walls, because it is such a significantly sloping site. Different styles of fences, because they all came at different eras, which I'll get into in a second. And then, like I mentioned, the seating that's on the Tremont Street side, some picnic tables and some other more classic benches on the site. So at KZLA, we always like to go back a little bit and understand how the site developed, where it came along the way, because I think it helps inform us of why it is the way it is today and what the elements are there. But it also, we just like to understand the background, because I think in the history of the site and the community and neighborhood at large as well, because I think it helps inform our design and the way we think about the site, because we know every park is different, and we want to make sure that it's not only appropriate to what the community is looking for, but it's also appropriate to the neighborhood as much as possible. So this plot plan, this is a historic plot plan from the city, goes back to 1888. Prior to this, in the just ahead of this mid-19th century, the Mission Hill, what is originally the Mission Catholic Church, which is why Mission Hill has the name it does, the neighborhood has the name, that was established in 1860s. Originally it was a wood structure, and shortly thereafter was replaced with the stone structure quarried from the area. And then in 1910, the two towers that are kind of infamous in the skyline and draw you in, those came about in 1910, also with local stone. So you can see we've outlined again the property border of what the park is today in that orange area. That was all in the 19th century. That was all homes. Shortly after this plan, the city took the land and in order to specifically to establish a park in this area. It's a park and the library. So all that land was set aside specifically for it. And if you can kind of go to the next slide, please. This shows a little bit more. It shows more of the development of the church and their facilities. They had that whole block. They had school. They had the Alphonsus Hall. Many of those structures are still there, not all necessarily in use. But you can see how that block changed. You can also see how there's Phillip Street that cuts through kind of where the driveway is now that lets you access the library and the school, but more meandering. You can see again, those residences were all still there. Shortly after this, in the next 10 years, the city took the land, and you can see how they've established an area for a playground. Some of the residences are still there, but the playground actually expanded across that Phillip Street, across that block to behind where the library is now. So the next slide is actually the first design that was developed in 1915. This was developed by the Olmsted brothers, which they were nationally renowned landscape architecture firm based right here in Brookline. They designed most of the Franklin Park and most of the major parks in Boston, that firm did. But I think what's really interesting about this slide and this plan that we're looking at is you'll notice that in the center of the park, there is that core of the playground, just like we have today. To the north of that is a baseball field, just like we have today. And to the bottom of the slide, which is again Tremont Street, that's again a very passive park with seating and planting. So it's always been very similar to what we have today. Off to the right side, which goes again behind the school, there was listed as an open air gymnasium, but there was a track designed for that. So this plan was designed, but it wasn't actually implemented for another 10 years or so. The plans were developed by this firm, but actually the city then took over and did all the construction and the design of all the walls. So you can see that curvilinear wall in the middle was actually part of that goes back 100 years, which I think is pretty interesting and nice to have those remnants from the original park design. Oh, and you can also see where there was a field house in the middle of the park behind where the library stands today. So next slide shows a little bit later, but you can still see how the whole area at this point in 1930s was actually developed as the park. The library has been constructed at this point, but the field house is still there as well. That's the pink building right there. And then I think the next few slides is development in the 20th century. This is a close-up of that passive area on Tremont Street. It's again, there's horseshoe pits in there. There's a couple of horseshoe pits. There's a lot of plantings. There's a lot of seating. So again, it's always been the kind of space that you come and, you know, socialize with, meet people with. It's more relaxing versus the rest of the site is much more active, where you have the playground and the ball fields. Doesn't mean that's what needs to stay, but just understanding the context and why we have what we do today. So this image is relatively recent, but focuses on the playground in part because in 2003, 2005, there were substantial improvements to that playground area, which involved a local artist by the name of Ross Miller. He has a number of installations throughout the city. Some are on the Greenway as well, but he was very much inspired by, you can't see it in this image, but that like the flower looking that's in the center of the playground on the ground surface of the splash pad is actually inspired by what's on the steeple of the church. And you can see the layout. You can see where those walls, the historic walls, still show up. Not all of it's still there, but 3 out of the 4 corners are still there. So I think if you can go to the next slide. So this shows the artwork and the custom spray installation that was designed by Ross Miller. You can see the inspiration, how it carries through on some of the fencing and some of the other details, as well as that kind of rose in the middle of the splash pad and some of the fences. And then you can see there was a lighting element as well on the right-hand side, which is really beautiful. And I'm trying to remember if the lighting on the installation no longer works, but it was all custom designed, both the splash pad and the light installation there. I think the next image, so going back to existing conditions. So again, same layout, passive park, playground, and the ball fields. And so for that, Kyle's going to dig in a little bit deeper to the conditions of what's there.
All right, thank you, Danielle. I'm Kyle Zick, a landscape architect, and I'll just pause a second and give a little bit more context of this meeting tonight. So as B outlined in the project schedule, this is the first meeting of 3 public meetings. And this is our chance to ask you all kinds of questions and get feedback before we design anything. So tonight, we're not going to show you any design alternatives because we feel like that would be just putting the cart before the horse. You know, we want to hear more about how you use the space, what your concerns are, what you think are great aspects of the park, or what we need to add. But we're going to show you our observations about the park, which will hopefully help kind of get that conversation going a bit, and remind you of certain aspects of the park, the uses or some of the shortfalls or some of the issues, and then hopefully you'll tell us more. So I think you've heard us describe the park the way this diagram refers to it. Tremont Street's on the lower part of the slide, Smith on the top, the Basilica is over here, and then the library is to the lower right. The upper part of the park being the passive use, the play area in the core, and then the baseball field along Smith Street. We haven't spent any time really talking about the parking spaces. They do fall within the project boundaries. Some of those spaces are used by the school, some by the library. But that's part of this project area. So when we start to look at a park, we break it down different ways. You know, in this slide, we're thinking about circulation, and this circulation is primarily pedestrian, although some of that coincides with the vehicular circulation to the parking spaces. And the thickness of the lines indicates, you know, if it's a major or a minor circulation route. So we see a lot of through traffic between the streets, Smith and Tremont, along that driveway that continues all the way up. But there's 3 entrances off of Tremont, which I think are fairly well used. The center one, you know, which connects the passive space to the playground probably more than the sides. But there is an accessible route that starts to take you down the slope over on the library side of the passive space. And then down that center circulation route is a large set of stairs. So the accessible route is around the side and then here into the playground area. And then we show these minor connections if you were getting out of your car and then either going to the school, the library, or the park. And there is access off of Smith Street through stairs and an accessible ramp to get you to the playing field and the players' benches, and, you know, as a cut through to other circulation routes. I didn't spend any time on the circulation around the playground. I think we'll get into that more, but you know, it is kind of this wheel, you know, a hub that radiates out into the different aspects and the different uses, from swings to basketball to the different age group and the different components of the play area. So then we start to get a little more technical and think about how the park either meets or doesn't meet some codes and regulations. And some of this is related to ADA accessibility, some of it to building code, but I'll give you a sense of the kind of things that we look for. You know, so the pathways in the passive park, some of those sidewalks have a side slope, we call it a cross pitch, that exceeds what the code allows. It's more than 2%. Some of that accessible route that goes close to the library is steeper than allowed, or the handrail doesn't comply, those kind of things. In the playground, there's no accessible route to the lawn, even though the lawn is a well-used feature. The play space, the rubber surfacing, is the only accessible route to the different play components, even though there are other areas that should have accessibility. And some of the bench spaces or the benches don't have pads for wheelchairs adjacent to the benches. There is a location on the wall too, where there's by building code, if you have a grade change greater than 30 inches, that you have to have a railing there. And some of the sidewalks along the circulation route that are related to the parking don't have any curb ramps for a wheelchair to get up or down. And there are no accessible parking spaces in these parking lots. The picnic tables, not all of them have an accessible routes or companion spaces. And then even the accessible ramp for the ball field is too steep and doesn't have all the different components in terms of railings and that kind of thing. So there's a number of things that need to be addressed. That's not a surprise to us because ADA just celebrated an anniversary, but it's still not that old. You know, it came in the early 90s or 1990 actually. So parks that had a major renovation prior to that typically, you know, don't comply with a lot of these. And the building code with respect to handrails and ramp railings has changed quite a bit over the years. So that's not a surprise to us either. But a comprehensive project like this will address these kind of issues because as soon as we start to do a project of this magnitude, we have to bring it all up to code. So the playground itself, we zoom in on because we really would like to get a lot more input on how this playground works. You know, it's organized all around this center space, you know, it's an art piece, but it's also a lighting piece and it's also a splash pad. And it has a ring of flowering pear trees around it and then benches that would be in the shade of those trees. But that also gives you the opportunity to kind of observe someone who's using the swings or the younger kid equipment or the 5 to 12 equipment or even the basketball hoops. So it's organized very formally. But there are also parts of the playground where it abuts the wall here, where the pudding stone outcropping comes out in a more organic way. Danielle mentioned the remnants of the wall from the Olmsted design along the 2 to 5 area here, but also along this whole edge that abuts the ball field. Here's some photos of some of the play equipment components, starting with the basketball hoops, just 2 small informal courts. You know, it's not a full court or even a half court. It's more loosely arranged. And then the play equipment is, you know, beyond its useful life. And typically Boston Parks would tell you that they're on a cycle to redo a playground every 15 or 20 years because that's kind of the wear and tear duration, but also the codes relating to playgrounds change in that time frame. And also so do the way people play, and also some of the trends in play styles and play equipment. So, you know, while this may have been, you know, the rage at the time, there are all kinds of options that we'll ask you about for the new playground. And I've already mentioned the splash pad. It's, you know, certainly got some wear and tear in some of the components of the water play, the lighting, and the surfacing. So this is something we'll look at. The other thing I should mention, you know, we have rubber surfacing to the play equipment in certain locations and then wood chips. The wood chips, the Parks Department maintenance crew tells us is a real challenge because they can't get a pickup truck to this level of the park to even replenish the wood chips. And the wood chips are hard to keep clean of trash and debris. So that's something we'll be looking at. And then in terms of site furnishings, these are, you know, all the things that, you know, populate the park, from benches, picnic tables, light poles, drinking fountains, gates, bike racks, and some of the benches related to the sports field. I don't think I need to get into each one of these. You know, this is fairly well summarized here, but there are some locations where components are missing too, where there's an obvious, you know, spot on the pavement that looked like there used to be a bench. We looked at the original drawings and yes, you know, a bench has been removed probably because it was damaged. And here's some photos of the mix of furnishings that we have. Near the playground, this is the drinking fountain. This is a drinking fountain with a bottle filler down at the baseball field. There's also a bike rack at the baseball field. And then we have backed and backless benches of different materials in the parts of the park. And we have a circular bench surrounding a tree, and then some picnic tables, fairly closely spaced, in that same area. We have players' benches, bleachers, and a gate that provides access to the field. So then I shift gears, from some of the furnishings to, the growing elements of the park, the planting. And the good news is that the trees in this park, for the most part, have been very well maintained. They're obviously been pruned on a fairly regular schedule. They're in good condition. This map looks like it conveys a lot of information. I'll decode it for you a bit. Each one of these labels relates to a symbol, a circular green symbol, which is a tree. And this label, 20-inch, means that's the diameter at 4.5 feet off the ground. And then NM is an abbreviation for what kind of tree it is. It's a Norway maple. And then the other letter is its condition. F happens to be fair. All the legend for all that information is over here on the left. So you'll see a lot of G's for good condition, which is, that's good to see on a park like this. Oftentimes we'll go into a park and we will not see trees in that good condition. Particularly, look at the passive park here. All the trees are in good condition. And you have a good variety of tree species and of size. So, in size, we equate to age. So you like to have the diversity of species and size to have an urban forest that can continue and sustain. And here are a few photos of those trees organized by area. This is up by Tremont Street. Nice shade trees that kind of populate that space. We start to shift down to the playground. There's this purple leaf plum that has seen better days. There's flowering pears that surround that circular space. And then there's some Norway maples up against the wall of the church on the ball field. They haven't been pruned as often as the other trees, likely because of access challenges. And then there's red maples along Smith Street between the field and the raised curb along the back of sidewalk. So then we also talk about lighting, because lighting has a lot to do with the perception of safety and how comfortable people feel in the space at night. And particularly important this time of year. You have a day that was 60 degrees, but at 5:30 it's dark, and it's still an opportunity to use the park. And the passive part of the park, closest to Tremont Street, is very well lit. And each one of these circles represents a light fixture. There's a bright dot in the center, which is an actual light fixture. And the larger yellow circle is to give you an impression of the how far that light extends. And I also brought out a light meter to the site to be able to measure the light levels, and very good light readings in the passive park until you get closer to the library, and it gets dark fairly quickly. The other thing you'll notice is there's no yellow circles in the play area. Boston Parks generally doesn't light playgrounds. With the splash pad off, none of those light fixtures were on, so the playground is completely dark. There is a light fixture at this entrance to that level of the park, and there's some lighting associated with the parking closest to the school. And then a lot of light spills from the school and illuminates that pathway fairly well. And then there's street lights along Smith Street. The ball field itself is dark. There's no sports field lighting. And here's a few photos from nighttime that fairly well represent, the atmosphere at night. The upper terrace, the passive park, is well lit. The ball field you can see is dark. You see the glow from other uses in the distance. So we covered a lot of ground, and it's a chance for us to step back and stop talking and listen more to you all. So hopefully this has given you, kind of a hint at all the different things we're looking at, and will spur you on to give us feedback on the different aspects of the park, how it's used, and what you would like to see for the future. So thank you.
Thanks, Kyle. We can have the next slide. So now is our chance to listen to what you have to say about this park and discuss it. And in order to lead a good, healthy, robust discussion, we have a couple of tips and suggestions we'd like to share. If you could hit the next screen, that'd be great. So we're going to ask everyone to be respectful and use respectful language. Share the airtime so everyone gets a chance to be heard. If you disagree with something that you hear, consider asking a question rather than arguing to prove your point. It is absolutely okay to disagree, but please do not personalize it. Focus on the idea that the person brings up and not the person. Speak up if you think this process does not seem fair. If you talk about people who are not here, please do not use their names. Please speak for yourself and not the group. We all share responsibility for making this conversation productive, and everyone please listen to each other. So with that, I'm just going to give a quick reminder. In order to contribute to this discussion, you have to use the raise hand icon at the bottom of the screen and we'll call on you. Or you can type your question into the Q&A button and we'll respond to those questions right now. We've been responding during the presentation, but we're going to take this chance also to read some of our responses just so that if other people are interested, they can hear them as well.
We have one person.
Okay.
Dennis, you can unmute yourself and speak. Dennis? Dennis, you're unmuted. You can speak. Not sure if your mic isn't working.
Okay, maybe we'll move on.
Dennis, just raise your hand again if once you're able. Mary Alice?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, my name is Mary Alice Sandy. I'm a teacher at the Tobin Elementary School. I've been there for over 20 years, so I was part of the process. I forget when it was, about 15 years ago, I guess, when the park was renovated. So I wanted to come tonight to hear about what you're doing, and I'm excited to be part of this. The students at the Tobin and the Mission Grammar School use the playground during the school day and after school. I know lots of other children do as well, but we tend to dominate during the school day. So it is a crucial part of it's their way of getting some exercise during the day. And there are a lot of things that we love about the park. That upper area, the seating area, is a great place for us to bring our class during lunchtime. That circular bench is big enough so that an entire class can sit around the tree and at the picnic benches to eat together, which is really nice to be able to do outside. I think the last time they renovated, if I may be wrong, but that's when they connected the upper part to the play area. And I've always thought it would be really nice to be able to connect the play area to the field to make it feel like one continuous play area, and to you can't really see that well from the play area if you're looking at the field. So I think it would be nice for those things to be connected. I also, the sprinkler area always, it has never quite felt right to me, and it may be that we're not there as much during the summer, but the metal poles can be dangerous when the kids they're always trying to find a way to play in that nice flower area. But those big metal poles kind of just feel like they're in the way more than being part of part of the playground. So I'm kind of curious what some ideas would be for that area to make it feel a little bit safer. Um, the rocks, that I really love the natural rocks all around in the stone. The kids tend to like to climb the rocks, which I understand, but it is unsafe. So I'm curious to know if there would be, the possibility of incorporating some type of rock climbing element either there or nearby. The last thing I'll say is we have surveyed the students with some questions, and I have been in communication with Abigail. So I think I'll wait until then to share the students' ideas. I think that probably makes the most sense. I'll speak for myself now, but thank you for inviting us to this.
That sounds so great, Mary Alice. And yeah, I was going to say, you've been in touch, so I'm really glad that you could make it here tonight. And it's really fantastic to hear your experiences in the playground. I mean, just the details, like all of the kids in a class can fit on that circular bench. It's like we can go and visit the site and say, that's a really big circular bench, but it doesn't occur when we hear, oh, that sounds very useful, and sort of consider different scales for different things like furnishings. So thank you so much for all of those points. That is some really great feedback.
Thank you.
We have a couple of questions here that we've got in our Q&A, and I just wanted to quickly go through them. Someone, Maggie Cohn, asked, she was involved in the last overhaul of Sheehy and Mission Hill Playground, and she's curious what is the reason for this redesign, or the elements in poor condition. And this was brought up, I think Kyle mentioned this too, but Parks likes to renovate playgrounds about every 15 years. Safety standards change, things degrade. So basically we're due for this right now. So this is why we are addressing it. And then also Maggie brought up the good point that a lot of the design in the playground, specifically the spray area, was inspired by the rose window on the church next door. So the fence and the archway entrance as well. So those are good details to include. So should we go back to someone raising their hands?
Yes, we have Gary. I'm gonna unmute him. Gary, you can go ahead.
Hello. Hi,
Gary.
Gary Walling. I live on Worthington Street. I'm also the president currently of Community Alliance of Mission Hill. Firstly, I'd like to thank you. It was really great to get a huge background about the history of this park. Kind of a little bit of a flutter when I, as an art history major, seeing that Olmsted had an idea for, at least the Olmsted group had an idea for our park. So I kind of feel like we're tied in with the whole emerald necklace a little bit here. Obviously, there's a lot of things that that you've pointed out that are needing. I think some of the big concern, I think, is at night with lighting. There is that one corner that you pointed out that's a little dark that tends to attract some folks who kind of hang out there and maybe enjoy some adult beverages at night. But generally speaking, this is a very well-used park for Mission Hill. Come and see it at so many different times of the day, and you'll see people using it. I love that the local schools use it, that it's their playground and it gets a lot of use, like the neighborhood children use it in the summertime. We get a lot of college students using it. We have a lot of Southeastern college students, so that baseball field gets a lot of use as a cricket field, which is really quite nice to see every once in a while. There's a lot of guys that, kind of hang out on the Smith Street side during warm weather, and then there's softball. So this is a great community space, and I'm very excited that some renovations are happening.
So this is Cindy Walling. I'm going to just not raise my hand because I'm part of this computer group. And I'm just wondering about what is that the really poorly drained little sloping area that in the south end they would probably call a meadow, in terms of how that can be remedied. And so we wouldn't need to have a horrible railing at that juncture where it meets the play area.
Thank you.
Cindy, I'm wondering if you could describe that space a little bit more so we know exactly where you're talking about.
It's the dirt patch that is, leading down along the stairs from Tremont Street. And that passive area, there's a set of stairs that go down.
Yep.
And it's
To the left of those stairs if you're going up to Tremont Street. So that exactly where you have the pointer.
Yeah.
It's a nice little slope, and sadly enough for Mission Hill, you would think for Mission Hill you'd have a great place to go sledding, but I don't think there's many open hills that you can sled on easily. This park it's such a beautiful, nice little hillside that it would love. I know it's a difficult space probably for drainage, but it would be great if that could be green space. I could just imagine kids hanging out, especially in the times of COVID, if kids could hang out in a big open space and have classroom space out there on a really nice day, because of the slope, the teacher could be at the down part of the hill. So it's just been one part of the playground that is really kind of a sad bit, because it just really can't grow grass at this point. I don't know if it's the slope or the drainage or what.
And do you think any of that's because of where? I think the reason I ask, 3 times I've been to the site, there's been daycares using it as like a small sports field, just playing games on the grass.
It might be where. I just think it's been so long that patch has gotten, once the topsoil, I think, had been eroded off. I think it's been a long time. It's really hard for the grass to grow back. It's the one big open non-planned space near the playground. So it does invite a lot of running around in a grass field. Again, back to what the teacher had been saying, because it doesn't connect as easily to a big open, this big open field below. So if there wasn't a baseball game or something going on where kids might want to just go from the upper part and run around on the grass, that's the spot that they can run around on. So I think it just gets a lot of wear and tear, and I'd hate to see it turned into something like hard surface. If it could be preserved and brought back to a grass surface with proper drainage or something, it would be great.
That's great to hear. Thank you so much, you guys, because I mean, really, it's one of our efforts, as we have to deal with more rainfall and, water management on site is very important. So we're definitely not looking to increase the amount of paved surfaces, just generally. Of course, if there's something that seems very appropriate, we would, but that's good to hear your experiences with it. I also wanted to note that Maggie Cohn on the chat said that it was envisioned as a place for folks to sit and listen to music or talk, etc. So I think sort of like not quite a structured amphitheater, but that type of thing. So that's sort of good background information there. I want to go back to our Q&A list here, and we have a question from Dennis Poltinas, who said that, sorry, the mic isn't working. His question is about the recent work on the Smith Field. You didn't mention it, but there were some renovations there and irrigation added. Do you have a date for when that happened? That is a good question. We were just talking about that before the meeting. I think it was in the early 2000s. And if you want to email me, abigail.chatfield@boston.gov, I can get you that information. But I personally do not have that off the top of my head, but I think it was in the early 2000s. So should we go back to anyone else raising their hand?
Can I jump in a little bit here, B? It's Rob Rotenbucher. I know there is work going on at Smith now that the next phase is supposed to start in the spring of 21 at Smith, but there's a lot of different fields at Smith. Some belong to the city. There's also some state fields that are near there that some people think are part of it. So if you send us a question, we'll definitely answer for you to make sure we're answering the right location. I also want to add a little bit something that we found out just today. Great news. We got a state grant for this park. We have an extra $400,000 to redo the field below. So I also want to make sure people, I know the scope of this work originally said that it did not include the field, but the fact that we just got $400,000 dedicated to the field means we're also opening it up to what's going on down there. And we literally just found out about that grant. We got official word maybe 2 hours before this meeting. So we didn't have a lot to prepare for this. But if people want to talk about the field too, we encourage you to give us your ideas about that, because that will certainly be included in this project.
We ready for the next one?
Yes.
Mary Ann, you're unmuted.
Yeah, I just walked through the park this evening before the meeting, and I talked to a group of guys who were playing dominoes on Smith Street. They had set up a table built into the park. One guy was sitting on the ledge, the other two guys had chairs. And they said they wondered whether or not it would be possible to have foldable tables down at that end of the park. That was just the idea they had at the moment when I asked them what they could do to improve it. And I think part of the reason the Tremont Street side is in such good condition is that most people walk on the paths. You very seldom see people not on, well, I should say, I very seldom see people not walking on the paths. So that might help keep the trees in such good condition. My organization did have an event where we set up tables on that side of the park. And we included the grassy areas, and some of the people that had mobility issues felt that the grassy areas were not stable enough for them to, were not even enough for them to walk on safely. So they didn't go visit tables that were in the middle of the area. The younger people who were healthy didn't see that as a problem. I know that in the summer, a lot of kids go and a lot of people go to the library to use the bathroom when they're at the park. Oh, the other thing those guys thought I talked to on Smith Street, they thought there should be lights on the baseball field at night, at least until 10:30, so people could play baseball until then. Personally, I don't think lights are a big issue. I thought all the parks were closed at night, so might keep people out. I didn't know until today that the parking was part of the park. Every time we've applied to use the park, we never even included the parking because we never knew you could park there. You should check with the library, but I don't think the library knows they can park there. They just have the site on their building, but they may know it now. I don't know. I always thought it was part of the school. And I wonder if there's some kind of lease arrangement between the Parks Department and the Tobin School so they can use it during the school season and day. I haven't really played in the playground nor sat in the meadow or played in it, so I have no comment about those, but I see it gets a lot of use. And
sorry, can I interrupt one second? You started off by saying you were talking to some guys who were down on the Smith Street, and then you cut out when you said the thing that they were looking to see in the park. Would you mind repeating that?
They had brought their own folding table and chairs. Okay. They were wondering if it was possible to make some kind of folding tables on that part of the park.
Seating tables, okay, thank you.
So they could sit there. I also asked them if they thought we should get rid of some of the parking spaces and bump the street out there. And they said, no, you couldn't do that because of the school buses. But they just thought there should be better seating for people who want to sit down at that end and play dominoes or relax during the summer.
That is good perspective to hear. And yeah, we would not be able to expand into the road. That would be a different over our.
Well, I'm always thinking about getting rid of roadways in Mission Hill, so that
Hey.
was just my idea.
Not a bad idea.
But the other thing is, I also talked to all the dog walkers seem to walk through there. I was in there with my dog, and I talked to another person who thought that it was a really good area. She observed that sometimes she's seen people sleeping in the park at night. I've never seen it myself, but we. That's like a citywide safety issue that's not a park design issue. That I don't think that can be addressed by park design per se, but it's more of a management issue. But yeah, I would be kind of concerned if we lost a lot of the park in order to meet the ADA guidelines for slopes. I'm not sure how you would address those, not to lose park space.
I don't think you'll necessarily lose park space. Most of the things we identified were fairly minor and subtle issues that I don't think would be all that obvious after we corrected them.
And then finally, some of us are talking about creating neighborhood walking paths where people could walk safely without having to cross the street. In this block, Tremont, Smith Street, St. Alphonsus is one of them where you could walk all around the block without having to cross the street. And this pathway through the park would be like a shorter route for people who didn't want to walk the whole route. So we're thinking about it. So to keep it walkable, it'd be really good. That's it.
Thank you so much, Marianne. I want to bring this back to the Q&A that we have also. Ellen Moore says, I would like to bring your attention to two Brookline parks, Fisher Hill Reservoir Park and the Brookline Avenue Playground. Both have a wonderful balance of natural and built environments and active and passive uses. I'd love to see that sort of balance here. So thank you for bringing that up. Are there any other hands being raised?
No, there's not. Well, actually, no. We have a few more that just came in. We're gonna let Trisha. Go ahead, Trisha.
This action was not taken lightly and was done in the best interest of everyone, including Pastor Carl. Love you, peace. So, what exactly happened?
I had a question about the condition of the wall that abuts the church and all around the. So I hadn't noticed it, but somebody had mentioned to me they were concerned about the condition of the wall that abuts the line going up alongside the church.
Yeah, that's something that we will look at too. We have other consultants on our team, one including a structural engineer that can look at that, and we'll be able to answer that question.
Okay. Thank you.
So we have a question also from Mary Alice at the Tobin School. Is there enough room to create some kind of track along the perimeter of the ball field? Designers, what do you think of that?
I think that's something we can look at. I don't know. I don't even know the dimensions of the field offhand. So that's something we'll have to look at to see if that can be done and still provide, you know, a regulation size field.
I see we have a raised hand, Maggie Cohn.
Yes, we have Maggie Cohn.
Very snazzy technology. The little window that invites me to unmute myself. It was interesting to hear the concern about the water feature, the splash pad and the pipes as a hazard. And I've always really loved the water feature, and I'm wondering if, and I know the lighting has actually been problematic in an ongoing way. So I'm wondering if it's possible to keep that and improve it somehow.
Yeah, well, we're really curious to hear what you guys have to say about that. And so thank you for that feedback. It is public art. So it's something that we, it's not just a simple playground. This is sort of listed in the documentation as public art in the city. And we've spoken to the artist, and he has been very open to what the community wants. So if this is something where it's functional as far as the spray features go, it's still working and the hardware is all good, and it's in reasonably good condition as far as its function, but the lighting doesn't work and there are upgrades that could be made. So if we hear from you guys that this is something that is good, we like it, then we can, work around it and try and perhaps improve it a little bit. And if it's something that, doesn't seem to fit the context anymore and perhaps creates too much of a danger for children trying to run around, then that's important too. So we've heard, both of those things, and thank you for weighing in on that. We appreciate that.
I do see tons of kids using it in the summertime, and there is no sort of water feature around here, and when it gets hot, I think it's just a nice thing to have. So I would like to see some thought put into how that can be maybe kept and improved.
That sentiment is echoed here in the Q&A. Gary Walden says, we love the water feature and it's the only water park in Mission Hill. We'd love to keep it and get the right thing.
We have Ellen Moore also. Ellen, you're unmuted.
Hi, I just wanted to comment on what Maggie said. It's true that kids love a water feature. I don't personally think that is the most wonderful water feature that we could have, but if the community wants that particular one kept, one way to make it safer would for it to be not so much in the center of the playground area. So if the playground could be redesigned so that the water, leave the water feature, but redesign the playground so that the water feature wasn't at the epicenter, so that people wouldn't be running through it all the time and running into the poles. That's my suggestion.
Yeah, I think if we were going to consider doing something different, we would still do a splash pad or a spray feature in this park. So there's no concern of removing that as one of the things that Mission Hill Park receives. As climate is getting warmer and warmer, it's more and more important to have these types of features in our playgrounds. So just so you understand, if we're talking about not going with this particular spray feature, there would be another one that would perhaps replace it. So. Sorry.
Am I still unmuted?
No, go ahead.
I just meant not have it as right in the middle, have the water feature over to the side, because just if you ever watch children play, whatever is in the middle of the area becomes a hallway of sorts. And if you don't want a lot of traffic in an area and you don't want people running into poles, for example, it's better to have it over in the side so it doesn't seem like, it's not the connector to all the other sections. That's all I was saying.
Okay, that's a great point. Thank you.
Next we have Mary Ann.
I guess I'm the person who's not a fan of the design of that water feature. I understand the intention. I think that I've seen it looks like to me that regularly it's not spraying the correct amounts of water at the right location. Sometimes it looks like a couple of holes are spraying a lot and all the other holes are just dribbling. That could just be a maintenance issue or could be a design flaw. And I wanted to point out, we do have another sprinkler that's more designed for kids up on Dell Ave at the little tot lot up there, but it's not as heavily used as this one. This one really does get used a lot in the summer. Um, and a lot of kids, and I don't think the basketball hoops are a destination for people who really want to play basketball. I think they go more over to the Southwest Corridor Park, which is not that far to play basketball. This is just shooting area. So I don't know if we need to redesign that to make it more of a basketball feature or not. You know, it's not, I don't see kids really, any case, that's that. And I had mentioned that moving this looks like that blue area south of where the water feature is now could be where it could go. Right there. I'm not sure what's there, but it is kind of nice to be walking down the street and seeing the kids running around and yelling and playing in the water.
Mm.
So there is a safety issue there that you can really see the kids playing. Meaning the public's looking at what kids are doing as opposed to kids being secluded someplace.
Yeah, that's a good point to bring up also, just about sightlines within the park, where if we've been made very aware of that being a desire and an added sort of feeling of security is trying to open things up so that people can see more parts of the park. Is there anything else, Marianne?
I'll probably think of something later. That's it for now. I actually had one of my friends who was supposed to be on because she was telling me she wanted to make improvements to the playground, but she didn't log on today.
Well, tell her she can email me and
yes, I will.
Phone call, anything works.
Yeah.
I wanted to bring up the Q&A. Dennis Poltinas said the field dimensions are not regulation size now for LL, which I think is Little League, maybe for softball. Would possibly be interested in sports field lighting. Little League does use the field Monday through Friday, 5 to 8. Our games have to end early sometimes. I don't believe that sort of court lighting, like the large sports lights, are going to be possible with the budget that we have. But Kyle, if you want to talk about this.
Well, I think, as we start to coming out of this meeting, we'll have lots of ideas and we'll put pen to paper a bit and look at all kinds of options, and we put cost to all that. So, Rob and V have mentioned the budget, a couple different pots of money, and we'll just have to, see what works, what fits, and what priorities are. So, it's hard to say anything's off the table yet, right?
And just to be clear, we also consult with permitting, Paul McCaffrey, if you do any sports or use the fields, Paul, and we don't really change anything on any of the fields without at least consulting with Paul and hearing his thoughts on what the usages are, what is needed for what he sees as trends that are coming up. So we will definitely also talk to Paul about the needs here as well.
We have Mary Alice also from the Tobin again.
Hi again. I wanted to add that there are a lot of benches in the upper street area, and there are a lot of benches in the play area, which I think is great, especially today with the need to spread out. I think the park lends itself nicely, to letting parents sit and watch their children and still be apart from one another. There's not much though down below. There are the little bleachers, which are pretty small near the field. And then there are two, maybe three benches along Smith Street on the, within the fence. So I think it would be nice to have some more seating areas around the field. And I wanted to also add that the sight lines are a concern, whether is if you're in one section, you can't see in the others, but then there are also some little corners and there's this gate that goes to the church. I know they've tried to fix it a couple of times, but yeah, if you move over a little bit further, so um, if you're at the swings, the big swings, just a little bit closer to the field, there's this gate there that always seems to be of interest to children, and it doesn't seem very secure. I think maybe something has been done to it, but that's always feels a little insecure, like a kid could go right underneath and disappear. So I wanted to mention that. I'm guessing it's the church's gate, but I'm not sure. That's all.
We don't have anyone else right now with their hands raised.
Okay. Well, if anyone wants to think back and see if you can come up with anything in the next few minutes, please do. Otherwise, we have the ways to keep in touch and to keep track of this project. We've got 2 QR codes on our screen. We're going to have a survey, which is sort of how you use the park and who you are. We'd love for you to fill it out. We'd love it if you could email it to people, as many people as you can. A web link in the survey itself. We're just trying to get as much feedback as possible to really direct our design and make it as close to what the community wants as possible. So we also have our project website, which is a great way to keep in touch and understand when the meetings are coming up. Right now we're saying it's December, but the specific date will be posted there. So please keep in touch with us on our project website. And thank you guys so much. This has been really, really helpful.
The only other thing to add is for our non-digital people, and you're already on this call, but there are some paper copies of the survey at 3 locations: at the Tobin School, at the public library, and at Lily's Pasta Express.
So please tell your friends about those locations as well. Thank you, Kyle. All right, thanks everybody.